All right, let's see. Is this thing on? Can you guys hear me all right? All right, fantastic. They don't serve beer this early in the morning, and I'm the first talk, so I've never spoken to this big of an audience before, so please bear with me. I'm here to talk about Ember, as Adam mentioned, and the title of this talk is Work Smarter, Not Harder. So the hope is that in 20 minutes, you should start the timer, guys. In 20 minutes, I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour of kind of what modern Ember development looks like. So let's dive in. My name is Erik Bryn. You can follow me on Twitter, eBryn. I've been really lucky. I got involved in Ember a while ago, and I've been able to make a living off of doing Ember consulting and Ember development and Ember training. So it's been a whirlwind. And so Ember 1.0 actually came out August 31st, 2013. And since then, so I had my actual 4-year commit anniversary. It's been 4 long years. And you'll notice that this was June 2nd, 2011. So it actually took us over 2 years to 1.0. And so this is a project that has been baking for a long, long time. And we've had, since 1.0, many versions of Ember. So all the point series releases, basically. And today, we're at Ember 1.13. And the 1.13 release was special because it marked a kind of an evolution of the framework where we introduced our new Glimmer rendering engine, which is highly inspired by React.js. So that was a lot of versions of Ember, and it's been 2 years, 13-point releases. That's because we have a pretty unique release cycle, and that there's always a new stable release every 6 weeks. And so we have 3 different channels, and these are basically, we took the Chrome release cycle and brought it into the Ember ecosystem. And so we have 3 different channels at a given time. And so every 6 weeks we go from there's a new stable release, which means that the beta channel becomes the release channel or the stable channel, and that master or canary becomes a new beta release chain. And so beta releases happen roughly every week, and then 6 betas turn into a stable 6 weeks later. And so we've actually just recently released the first beta of Ember 2.0, which is a really exciting release, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. Let's first opine on JavaScript for a minute, because I actually got into JavaScript, more recently. I'm not one of the old timers who's been trying to bang my head against the table, supporting IE6, while doing really fancy things in JavaScript. I came from a Rails background and primarily was more of a back-end, person that sprinkled in some jQuery where necessary. And so, even the JavaScript ecosystem then, and certainly even still somewhat today, is a story of where you're bringing everything yourself. You're starting from nothing and cobbling together a tool set to have something that resembles sanity that a large team can work on, ideally, right? And so that means things like, perhaps in the past, it meant write up your grunt file and figure out all the grunt plugins that you need to do your concatenation, your module system, your minification system, asset fingerprinting, all these kinds of things that come into building up a production-ready JavaScript application. And that was very much the world of Ember 1X. It required assembly, right? You had to compile these things together. And throughout the 1X series, we realized that this was one of the biggest impedances for getting people to use Ember and to use, and to build ambitious applications. They had to have, there were so many upfront requirements that you had to figure out before you could just start writing an Ember app. And, we kind of had an intermediate approach, was to, have a starter kit. And so the starter kit was the zip file that you could download, and it just had static HTML and JavaScript in it. But that didn't really give a compelling story because Ember has templates, and so every template was in like a script tag because we didn't have a build system to compile them, and you had a lot of misconceptions about Ember because of that, and it was frustrating. And so throughout the 1X series, we started diving into having more of a full stack story, like batteries included. And so that's the world of Ember 2.0, and also the recent history of 1X as well. We now have a tool called Ember CLI, which you can just npm install, and then that gives you a command, Ember new, and now you can generate a new Ember application. And the idea is here, when you're wanting to work on a side project, rather than you're working on the weekend, perhaps on a new side project, and you end up spending the first several hours of it just battling and putting together some kind of tool chain so that you can actually write the code that you wanted to write. And with Ember CLI, the idea is, that takes a minute, and now you're off to the races building your application. And so Ember CLI is built on a foundation of, community-backed projects such as Node.js, NPM, Broccoli.js, which is our build system, and then Babel, which is our transpiler. And so one funny thing was that Ember, actually we had to write our own transpiler because we had ES6 modules like, a year and a half or 2 years ago. And so Babel has now become kind of the de facto standard for being able to utilize modules today and additional JavaScript features. So we like to think of Ember as a full stack front-end framework, right? Everything you need to get up and running is here. So let's try to demo that. I'm not going to live code because I am a smart man. And so I have decided to pre-record everything ahead of time, and we're going to walk through it together, and hopefully this will work more effectively than me stumbling. So here's us generating a new Ember application. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. The font size gets bigger in a second. So here we are, Ember new my app. And this goes and it creates all of the conventional file structure that you're going to see in every Ember application. So if you're somebody who already knows Ember, you can jump into an Ember project and you'll immediately be comfortable and know where you are, where things belong, right? And this utilizes NPM, so I've actually accelerated it. It's installing many, many NPM dependencies. And it also installs your Bower dependencies as well. And so we're going to CD into this application and open it up in our editor. And so here you can see we've got basically an application folder and a test folder. Those are kind of the important ones here. And so if we open up app, we'll see we've got several different subfolders, and those are folders based on like the type of object. And so one of the common things you're going to see are components and templates, and we have this application.hbs template. And the application.hbs template represents basically the markup that is going to be global across your whole application, right? So let's say you had a nav bar that was present everywhere in your application. That code is likely going to be in your application.hbs file, right? So, so this is cool, but how do we actually start developing? Well, Ember CLI has a built-in development server, and it's probably one of the most advanced development servers you'll see out there. Unfortunately, I'm not going to show you all the features, but one of the cool features is that it has live reload built in. So you can just turn on the development server and start editing, and your browser is going to live reload for you. And so the other thing is that Ember CLI brings you a whole testing framework and test runner infrastructure out of the box, and that works also with live reload, right? So if you're writing test-driven code, you can start doing it right off the bat. And so here, we'll see that I can actually make changes to the application and watch the tests rerun as well. So that's very cool. And the next step we're going to do is we're going to actually generate our first route. And Ember applications are composed at the highest level of routes. And so routes are really important because we're building web applications and URLs matter, right? URLs shouldn't be an afterthought of the development process. They should be up front. You should be designing for URLs up front so that your users have links that they can bookmark and share, right? And if you just do it up front, you don't have to worry about it later. And Ember is kind of architected to kind of give you URLs for free. You just follow the patterns, and everything just works, including the data loading necessary for all these routes. So here we were. We just went to we generated a route, hello world, and this generates us some other boilerplate. So if we wanted to write a unit test, we would be able to do that. And then we, of course, have a template for that route. And so now if we go into the browser and we actually go to the route that we created, the hello world route, we're not going to see anything yet. Why? Well, because there's nothing in the generated template. So if we go into our editor and start adding things into our generated template, we're going to see, of course, with live reload, that those are reflected immediately. So what's happening underneath the hood here? Well, Ember CLI is smart enough to actually go and add the route definition into the router mapping file for you automatically. Now, you can, of course, go and edit this yourself and generate things on top, and it just works the right way you would expect it to. And so there's a convention here that is somewhat subtle. Whatever we generate the name of the route as, that becomes the name of the files on the file system, and it also, of course, is specified here in the router file. And so you didn't have to say, oh, this URL means this template. It's automatic. And you can override it, of course, if there's exceptional cases. So to touch on testing a little more, we're going to generate an acceptance test. And acceptance tests usually reflect user interaction with your application, right? So we want to test from the user's perspective. And so these are high-level tests, unlike unit tests. And you'll see that we've got a generated test for us that's just going to visit that route that we generated. And then right now, it's just asserting that the URL is correct. So you might imagine that a route could redirect you. Like let's say if we were adding authentication and we did this before logging in the user, we would expect this test to fail. We would expect them to be at the login route, perhaps, right? And so this is cool. These acceptance tests run in the same test runner as your unit tests. And that's really valuable because it improves the debugging experience significantly. We can run your application for you inside of the same test runner, which means that you don't need to have different windows open. You don't have to deal with different commands or anything like that. So we're going to take our simple acceptance test and just modify it a bit. We're going to navigate to the hello world route from the root URL, right? From like the index of the page, of the application. And so here we're going to see just this simple click helper. And this click helper is this basically just is jQuery, selector syntax here. We're going to find an A tag on the page that contains the text hello world. Now, usually you write nice little helpers around this, like that, don't require you to write this selector soup inside of your test code. So we might have like a click nav link helper, for example. So here we are, and we see we have a failing test right off the bat. Why? Well, because we didn't add that link, right, in our application template that links us to the hello world route. So we're going to go do that real quick. And so we're just going to go back up to the application.hbs, and we're going to add in here the navigation link. And so Ember has this great little link to helper, which does a whole bunch of stuff for you for free automatically without you having to do much. One of the things it does is it lets you use the names of the routes that you've specified. So if they are different from the URL, for example, you can refer to like the canonical name inside of the application. And if you ever choose to change how the URL serializes, you don't have to go and update all the links everywhere in the application. So that's valuable. But what else does it do? Well, it also gives you an automatic active class. So if you're on that route, that A tag will automatically have an active class for you. And we even do some fancier things for like if you're transitioning to a route, we actually put a transitioning class in before the route is active so you can actually handle those two different situations differently. That's a subtle detail that a lot of people get wrong. The user clicks a thing and a lot of stuff's happening and they don't think that their click actually registered anything, right? That's something that we've thought through. And so here we've got, that test passing. And so one of the things I wanted to show you real briefly about acceptance tests is that we have this really cool pause test helper. And this actually shows that the application is running inside of the test runner here. And so when you're writing your tests, you can use this pause test helper to actually start interacting with the application and make sure the state of the application is where you expect it to be at that point in the test run, right? And you can right-click, inspect element, you can run JavaScript code on the console, you can do everything you want. It's like the real application is running, it is the real application running in the test runner, just in a little isolated div, basically. And so that's most of what we're going to show, but about acceptance tests. And so what I want to show you next is basically the tooling that comes for free that you can utilize in your, in your development process, or perhaps in your CI environment. So here we have Ember Test. This is just running that same test suite that we saw in the browser by going to /tests. This is it running on the command line, right? And so if you prefer to run it on the command line versus, in the browser, you can do that as well. So this just runs it in Phantom.js, but it gets fancier than that. A lot of the times you have to worry about cross-browser testing, right? So we've got a test server built in as well. And this actually uses Testum underneath the hood. You might have heard of Testum. It's like Karma, the Angular testing framework, and so, or test runner, I should say. And so here we can go inside of our configuration file, and we can just add additional browsers to automatically run for us after every file change. So these are going to be running in the background, and you can hook these up to Growl notifications or whatever you want. And basically, while you're developing the application, you're going to get all of your tests running on every browser that is in your support matrix super easily. Now, let's see here. So that's the test server on your local machine, right, in development, in the development mode. But once you're set up and you're building a real production application, you want those tests to be running in a continuous integration environment. And so Ember CLI gives you Travis CI integration automatically. And so I'm just going to go here, and I pushed this little demo app to GitHub. This is the process of basically setting up a new app to be ran with Travis CI, so we're going to enable it on that repo. And now I can just push. And what do you think is going to happen? Well, these tests are going to automatically run in a cloud environment, just like they were running on our local machine, but they're going to run automatically after every push, right? So look at all the stuff we're not doing. I'm showing you roughly exactly what the process is. We're not configuring anything. This is all batteries included, right? And so here we can see we're running Ember Test, and we're going to see similar output to the console on Travis as we do locally. Now, this is cool. And locally, we had multiple browsers running, but we want our CI environment to run those same browsers too. So let's bring in Sauce Labs real quick via the Ember CLI Sauce add-on. And so here you can see we're doing Ember install. This is installing an add-on, and this is just an NPM package underneath the hood here. So this uses the technology you're already used to. And so now that we've installed that, I can go and basically, I did a little bit of configuration of like environmental variables underneath the hood here. But, sorry, you might not have seen that. Basically, we go in and we declare all of the different Sauce Labs launchers we want to use. So we're going to have a Chrome one, a Firefox one, a Safari one, and an IE11 one. And then we just tell Testum, when you launch in CI, use these browsers, right? And so we're going to go manipulate our travis.yaml file. This is the Travis config. It's just a little bit of boilerplate that you need to bring in here. And so there's my secret key. If you want 3 minutes on Sauce, there you go. And so now, after making that, we're going to push those changes. And so now Travis is going to see some new changes, and it's going to rerun. And now it's going to have that new configuration to use Sauce Labs. And so now we're going to actually see this, these tests running on multiple browsers. And I'm just going to give I'll show you a little demo of how cool Sauce Labs can be. So it's installing all this stuff. Going to start running the tests in a minute. So there we go. The tests start running. We run it on our Phantom, and now it's going to boot up in Sauce Labs in Chrome. And so let's take a peek. Let's go to the Sauce Labs web app, and now we can actually see the tests that are running. And we can open this test, and this one's finished. And look, here's a screenshot of the test runner. Maybe something went wrong. You can watch a screencast of your tests running on here as well, right? And this is the kind of productivity that you can just get out of the box with Ember CLI and the Ember add-on ecosystem. And so, anyways, so that was Sauce. Let's move on to components. So let's generate us a new component. This is an Ember component. We're going to build a random image component here. And so this is going to be fairly simple. All we're doing here is going to use a little handy web service called Lorem Pixel. which if you haven't heard of, you should check out. It's pretty great. So we're going to build up a little template for our component, and we're going to have an image tag in there with some data as the source attribute, right? That image source is going to be random URL, which is going to be a value inside of our component's JavaScript definition. And so here, we're going to use lorem pixel to get us a 200 by 200 image. That's all it takes. You can just, image source that. That's great for like prototyping or mock-ups or whatever. And so, and then in our hello world routes template, we're going to use this component. We can just invoke it using this handlebar syntax, random image. And so here we are. It's rendering. But we want to improve this a bit. It's just a single random image, and we'd have to refresh the browser to get new ones. So let's add a button real quick and show how easy it is to wire up an action, or event handling. And so, the philosophy here with Ember's action system is that we do a lot of the work. This is kind of like a simple sort of event handler, primarily used for clicks. And so you can very easily add a click handler to a button very declaratively, and you can start naming those click handlers things other than click, right? They can be named in the domain of the component or of the application. And so when somebody comes to this template and they see a click handler, they're going to know, oh, randomize, this is a random image component. Duh, this makes sense, right? It's not some click handler defined somewhere else that's triggering behavior on click of this button. And so all we're going to do for randomize is basically just set the random URL to something different. And I'm kind of hand-waving a little bit on this demo because it's a little bit more complex than that. But there we are. We basically have our random image component working. And so that's cool. But we need to get cooler. This is a boring demo. So let's install Liquidfire, which is the official animations library for Ember. So that's just another Ember add-on, like Ember CLI sauce was. And so now let's make this random image component animate when images change. And so the philosophy behind Liquidfire is that you should be able to bring animations in after building something. You don't have to design in animations. And so basically what we're doing here is just wrapping the area of DOM that we want to animate. And we wrap this inside of this liquid with helper. And so if you've done animation stuff in the past, you know that the important bit is that you have to render the before and after state, and then you need to transition between the two, right? So looks like oh, okay, good. The timer went down. I think I am actually over time. All right, so let's just really rapid fire go through this. We're going to use a crossfade. All we needed to do was just specify use crossfade, and now we're crossfading across these changes. But let's get fancier. Crossfades are boring. There's a great little example transition, and you can define transitions like crossfade. That's just something you can write yourself very easily, and Liquidfire provides a nice little promise-based API on top of a library called Velocity.js. And so we can use the Velocity.js APIs, and Liquidfire also added a generator, so we can generate a transition now in our application after installing it. So we're going to generate rotate below. We're going to paste in that definition, the transition. This is just defining the rules for how to animate. Now we can change this to rotate below, and voila, we are now rotating with one line of code in our template, right? So what's next? Let's create a very quick add-on. I think I'm going to skip this because I'm so short on time. Add-ons are basically the shareable units of code that you can spread on the around the Ember ecosystem, and you can Ember add-on an add-on just like you can Ember new an app, right? And they're just NPM packages, and so these add-ons are a lot like apps. You can generate components in them, and these components can do things like wrap jQuery plugins. So this is an example of us just creating a super basic jQuery date picker wrapping component. And the important hook here is didInsertElement. And so inside of didInsertElement, we can just call our jQuery code. And that's kind of how you can take a bunch of jQuery spaghetti and put it inside of components really easily. So We've got our Ember add-on, shows off, like, so you need to install jQuery UI into the add-on, right? So we can just use Bower to do that super simply, and we tell the Ember add-on what files inside of the Bower components directory we need to include. So voila, here we are. We have a date picker now pretty quickly based off jQuery UI. So, all right. We can publish that add-on. We can install it just using Ember install. Right? Very cool. Now, let's talk about emberaddons.com. Once you publish an Ember add-on, that goes to NPM, and we have some great sites like Ember add-ons here, which index all of the Ember plugins. And so we could have, if we didn't want to build it ourselves, we could have went out and we could have seen that there's plugins out there that already do this, and we could have Ember installed them ourselves. Emberobserver.com is another great resource. This is a site that actually categorizes and rates add-ons for you. So if you're looking for an autocomplete, I'm zooming through here, I apologize. If you want to look for authentication stuff, or style stuff, or components, or build tools, all this stuff is organized for you, so you can just go straight to it, and you know where to get it. So that's Ember Observer, that's Ember add-ons. I think we're getting very close to the end of our demo. Let's deploy this thing. Let's install our DivShot add-on, right? NPM, done. All right. So now we just need to do a little bit of configuration. We can generate the DivShot, JSON file to configure it. And this just has some simple, like the name of the application and whatnot, and the routes we care about. And now all we have to do is just run Ember DivShot push. Now the application that we wrote here is pushed off to the internet for our friends to take a peek at, let's see. And so there's the URL. We launch it. All right, how bad am I on time? Really bad? All right, great. Pretty bad. All right, so that's live coding. The Ember ecosystem. Check out these things. It's only like less than a year old. We've already got over 1,000 add-ons. Ember 2.0's first stable release is coming on July 24th. Ember is all about stability without stagnation. No big bang releases, no long-lived branches, no app rewrites, no Agile. Just kidding, Agile. We've Agiled your upgrade for you. We're not going to talk about all this stuff. Ember 2.0 is great. Ember's long-term goal is to be the glue layer between web standards, and that's what we're working towards. So Ember 2.0 is coming to an NPM near you. Ember 2.0 news, check out our blog. And that is all for me, friends.